Hello, family members. How you doing today? Hope you're having a nice weekend. Uh, Pretty sunny, bright day here in Florida. Gotta like that. I have a topic that I'd like to talk about that's kind of on trend, which is a little bit unusual for me. I don't usually try to talk about whatever is going viral. But this one is actually something that I have a sort of personal connection to. And I think once you see where I'm going, you'll get it, you know? So, anyway, the man or the bear? It's this thing, it's all over every social media outlet possible. It'll probably be on the legacy news at some point. You know how that goes. They always chase trends, right? Well, anyway, this thought experiment, I suppose, where a woman is asked if you were in the woods alone, would you rather have a bear or encounter a bear or a man? And women almost invariably answer the man, and it really makes men upset. Now, the thing about it that's funny to me is the answer, the man, is just clearly the right answer. Statistically, that's just the right answer. Doesn't have anything really to do with being a woman or a man. Anybody should say a man would be more likely to be dangerous because, I mean, like, statistically, men commit like 80% of the roughly 80% of the violent assaults in the country every year. That's like 2 million assaults, you know? Bears, there's bear encounters like maybe roughly 12 times a year, maybe one related ending in a fatality, and often there's some pretty extreme mitigating circumstances that even causes that to happen. So, we're talking about a country with, roughly 150 million men committing about 2 million assaults on various people, men and women, every year. And bears, I don't know how many bears there are, but there's like significantly less. But still, 12 versus 2 million, big difference there. But of course you could say, well, that's in a vacuum. Like, people, I mean, obviously people encounter more men than they encounter bears in their day-to-day life. So, what about a situation where it's about roughly even, like in the problem, you know? And for me, this isn't a thought experiment. This isn't a hypothetical. That was something I actually lived. When I first moved down to Florida, I had these two really young, vibrant puppies who I thought were going to be small breed mixes and ended up being, I don't know, maybe like part Whippet. We couldn't ever quite figure it out. That the Kimmy is 60 freaking pounds, like 65 pounds. So, of course, she's young, or that was, she's older now and she doesn't get exercise because I'm disabled. But before I was disabled, I used to take her hiking like all the time because she like literally needed it at that age. And so I moved to Ocala National Forest, which is in north central Florida, sort of north of Orlando and northwest of Daytona Beach. And so such a gorgeous place, and there was just so many great places to go hiking. But I had these two rambunctious puppies that just needed to run off leash. They had to. There was no way that I was ever going to run hard enough to keep up with them. So I was a lot more in shape than I am now, obviously, because I was hiking all the time. Like, sometimes, there were periods where I was literally hiking 7 days a week. Like, I'd get up before work and go hike And then, you know, sometimes I do an after work hike too. Like, you know, my dogs and I are, you know, we go out a lot. And because I had a dog that was having issues with aggression, I did not want to potentially encounter any other people or dogs or whatever. And so I'd go out into just like the wildlife track, the Alexander Springs Wildlife Track in Ocala National Forest. And there's just a whole bunch of like access roads back in there. And I'd drive somewhere way out in there and I'd park and then I'd walk the dogs. Because it was fairly unlikely that I'd run into anyone else doing what I was doing. And, you know, as outside of people who are out there to like do maintenance stuff, which doesn't happen very frequently, there's not a lot of people out there. But one thing that I would notice periodically is little encampments a ways in on some of the access roads where it was clear that, you know, people who were drifters or I don't even know, you know, I don't know what, that a very rustic, basic, you know, whatever like trash and dumped materials they could find had been made into, you know, just little encampments. And so I knew that it was possible that I could encounter somebody like that when I was out there. Now, another thing that Ocala National Forest is well known for is its bear population. Most people don't think of Florida and bears as being like a thing, but yeah, we have Florida's bears down here. The black bears that we have are similar to the ones that we had up north when I was living in West Virginia, but they're very like skinny, long, skinny limbs and tall, it seems like to me. I used to see them all the time when I was living up there in Ocala because they come in and try to raid your trash cans if you didn't like lock them up. And my next door neighbor did not lock up her trash cans, and so we had to deal with that like a lot. Like I'd have my dogs go nuts in the middle of the night, and I'd be like, oh, "Geez, there's another bear out there." Or I'd go to let them out to go potty around dusk or something, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Rrr!" I'm like, "Oh no!" Luckily, I always had them on leash, so we didn't have any trouble there. But so yeah, I knew walking in those woods there were bears. There were definitely bears that I could encounter at any time. And not just that, you know, I'm talking about woods in Florida with big ponds in there occasionally. So alligators were certainly a possibility. Wild hogs, which can be very aggressive, very dangerous. They were in there. You know, water moccasin, timber rattler. No, not, is it timber rattler or is it I think it was eastern diamondbacks in that area. Timber rattler's more like the peninsula. I only ever saw an eastern diamondback in all that time when I was hiking up there, but there's certainly a lot more water moccasins and coral snakes. You know, there's literally deadly snakes out there. Pygmy rattlesnakes were what I ran into the most frequently, but never had any bad encounters, luckily. However, when I was doing that, I had one of my aunts who lives down in South Florida, a more urban area, was just like aghast that I was doing that and was like, it's not safe. And she really wanted me to get a handgun. And I was like, I don't think so. Like, I don't, I know how to shoot a gun. I grew up in West Virginia, all right? My dad's a hunter. I have a partial hearing loss, and I just never really liked loud sounds. And I didn't like the suddenness of how the guns would go off, so I just don't like shooting. I'm not a very good shot. It's not fun, so I don't do it. It's been like decades, you know. But I consider getting a gun, because I know how to use them. I have my hunter safety card and all that. And really the reason that I considered doing that was because I was afraid that I'd run into one of those men that were encamped out there and I wouldn't know what they were going to do. would have no idea what their intentions were. And if they were bad, it would be hard for me to defend myself, not a fighting type, I got Soxy on my lap, by the way, this way. Yes, you'd probably rather look at him anyway, wouldn't you? But, yeah. So, very, very, very likely that I could have encountered a bear or any number of dangerous animals. But my concern, the reason I did consider getting a handgun, which I didn't ultimately do, was because of the potential of running into a man with ill intent. It's just the truth. I mean, I'm sorry to say it if it makes men feel bad, but that is literally the truth of the situation. I can't tell you that it's a different truth than what there actually was, And I want to note, I did not have any negative encounters with any drifters or with any wild animals in all that time. It was a remote possibility. But, as a woman in the world, especially as a aromantic woman who is never in a relationship, so I'm alone most of the time, and I have to think about safety stuff. And when I think about safety stuff, it's usually men that I have to consider. Men are the ones who've, you accidentally make eye contact in traffic, and they'll make vulgar gestures towards you. And I mean, like, I've never had a woman do anything like that, I don't know, men. I do not know why it is that 80% of violent crime that occurs in the United States is perpetrated by men. I don't know why that's the case. I'm not saying that there's some sort of intrinsic thing that's wrong with men. I have to think that it's somehow cultural, at least on some level. But I'm not trying to say or explain the reasons why. I'm just telling you what the truth is here. And the truth is, quite frankly, the response of men is the surprising thing about the bear versus man meme. It's not women's answers. The women's answers are just logical. It's just logical. Men's inability to handle logical reality being, casually affirmed, that's the really fascinating thing about this whole meme, It wouldn't have caught on. It wouldn't be a thing if it wasn't, for men's reactions. And I'll be frank, a lot of times when you hear stuff about people talking about backlash, it's sort of a manufactured thing. It's like, there's a few tweets about it, and, people are like that narrative, and so they push it out there. But I shared my story about hiking in Ocala National Forest on a few different public posts, on a reel, on a photo, on, things that had, fairly large followings. And I can tell you, I got so many men who were just like completely out of their mind, and tried to like come up with all sorts of things and projected all sorts of things onto me and made assumptions about me, wild assumptions. One guy was like, "Who do you call when there's an emergency?" "Mostly men." Checkmate. And I'm like, you don't know me, so how would you even have any idea? And actually, in my case, my mom is the person who I'm most likely to call during emergencies. Not because there's anything wrong with my dad, it's just my mom's pretty organized. It's just not like a gendered thing. If my dad was the sort of organized, member of their relationship, I'd probably call him. But when it comes to most problems, mom's going to be the most efficient at helping you find a solution. And so that's where I usually would start, like, it's just so weird that he had to like assume something about me and then use that assumption to discredit me. It was so funny. I could not help but laugh at him. And it's just so ridiculous. I- All I wanted to do was say, I lived this and this is the truth. And for some reason, that truth just completely knocked people off their rocker. And then, I mean, that's the thing. Those are the ones who actually had the, like, emotional energy to comment back on what I said. How many people do you think read that and they were like, yeah, and didn't say anything? Like, why is this the way it is? But then when I think about it, I have to remember it's basically the same thing that I talked about in, I think it was the last video, where, people, the worst thing you can do is reflect a truth back to a person. When someone sees a truth about themselves that they don't like in you or in your actions or anything they project onto you, that's gonna just, like, destroy them. Really. Like, because so many people, the way they get through the day is they're like, I won't deal with that right now. Or maybe they pretend like they don't see it. And when you force them to see the reality, when we force the male population of the United States to confront the fact that 80% of assaults are committed by men, and they have to try to think about what that says about them personally, I don't think they want to have to go through that. That amount of self-reflection is just not, desirable. They've been taught not to, The patriarchy and toxic masculinity has, stamped out a lot of the individuality and the strength of men, because they're forced to conform to a specific type of manhood. Not Socks, though. Not Socks. He's a good boy. He's sweet. But I feel sorry. I feel sorry for men on that level. I do. It's their own baggage, and they use it, and they're trying to cope with their baggage in such a way that harms women and children and other men, and that's not okay. Like, we all have baggage. We all have things we have to work through. We all have insecurities. And the way to do that is not to yell at some random woman that you found online who said a truth you didn't want to hear, I mean, I don't care. They can do whatever the heck they want to do. The great thing about being Southern is I just get to go, oh, bless your heart, and move on with my day. But, I do feel sorry for him. I hope that all those men that interact with me, that there was just one bad moment in their lives, and that they're not usually that upset or frustrated. I don't want to think about people having to live that way. I don't think that it's acceptable. I feel like everybody should have the opportunity to be happy and healthy, and healthy means psychologically as much as anything else. If you're in that much denial, what are you denying yourself? Well, family members, we made it through a Soxy invasion. And I guess he just had to remind us that males are great. And it's true. I'm quite fond of quite a few males. And females and non-binary individuals. People are awesome. I'm for it. I love people. I mean, this means something to me. It's not just aesthetic, So, don't shoot the messenger, guys. Take this moment, take an opportunity, then to think about your community that you're part of and what influence it has on you, but also what influence you have on it. I mean, look at Mr. Rogers. He was just one man, and he did so much to rehabilitate masculinity. You know, there is so much masculinity, so many elements of masculinity that are wonderful, but we just lose them all the time because of toxic masculinity bulldozing over them. I love compassionate men. I love men who are secure enough in who they are to just be who they are and not give any shits about what other men think about them because of that. Like, my dad pick up my hats and my mom's hats and sunglasses, and I wear Betsy Johnson sunglasses, or I used to before everything. And I mean, we're talking about some pretty flamboyant stuff, but he's secure. He didn't care. Been married to his wife for 50 years. No one's going to tell him that he's not a man or that he's less because of anything that he does. So maybe that's why I can feel such compassion for men, is because I've always felt compassion from a man. You know, maybe that's one of my greatest privileges that I have. Because, you know, I don't know that a lot of people ever see masculinity demonstrated that's not toxic masculinity. But I do. And my dad was a school teacher, caretaker of very, very medically fragile children. And he had patience and love for them that endures to this day. And he's not embarrassed about that. And that's strength. That's masculinity. So don't tell me that caretaking is a female thing. Don't tell me that men can't be compassionate and heroic. You know, I know that. But statistics don't lie. And a lot of men are not like my dad, unfortunately. Take care of yourself, family members. Love ya. Bye.